Good evening, ladies and gentlemen, and welcome to another edition of TBR. I'm George Binns, and we're going to continue the discussion we had a while back about STEM at the Y, and this time the emphasis is going to be more about the girls that participate in these STEM programs. And if you remember the last discussion, what triggered my interest in it was a newspaper picture, an article that's mentioned that Northeastern University had 52% female enrollment in their engineering program for the first time. And lo and behold, this morning I'm going through the websites, and I got one on architecture that's showing the brand new engineering building at my alma mater, the University of Rhode Island. And most of the people that were in those pictures were females. So it's a real happening, and it's very broad. It's not just Northeastern. And to tell us more about females involved in STEM, we have with us this evening again Ann Curry. Welcome, Ann.
Thank you. Thank you for having me back. I'm excited to talk about the STEM programs, especially those that reach out to females and help them to engage more in science.
Yeah. And I guess, again, dating myself back in the dark ages when I went to school, we were talking before the show about females had three options, home ec, nursing, or teaching. And that was just about it. Now, and I think, again, barely rubbing the politically incorrect, but I think more of the interest in females, girls going into science is the emphasis on biotech, whereas the hard sciences that I played with, mechanical engineering, rockets and motors and things that made loud noises, that probably didn't interest the females as much as biotech, and I think, as you mentioned earlier, the desire to help.
Yes, the desire to help. A lot of times young women, when they're looking at what career they want to go in, and if they're interested in the sciences, they'll go for something that they can see where they help, where they can see where their impact can be, whether that would be a veterinarian science, to be a nurse practitioner, to work in public health. These are things that girls seem to go to because they understand where the impact is. One of the things we do at STEM Horizons is to show them other occupations, to show them other female professionals that work in the STEM fields and in the hard sciences, in engineering, computer science, and so they can understand how there is still a factor of how they can help. But I do think that a lot of the, statistically speaking, a lot of the jobs that are out there are in biotech, are in biology, chemistry combined. So we are seeing more women go into those fields. There's still a giant disparity. In 1970, it is progressing, but there is still a giant disparity for engineering and the other hard sciences, including mathematics. In the 70s, it was about 8% female. In the 80s, it rose drastically to about 20. And now we're looking at only about 26 to 30%. The progress is wonderful, but in the hard sciences, the progresses are not quite as dramatic as they are in the biotech, but a lot of that is directly reflective of what are the opportunities in the job market, too, and what schools are changing to train.
Yeah. Well, I think a lot of people are starting to recognize that there's been a lot of dramatic things come about that were caused by females. And I think the first one is Madame Curie and discovering radium way back, and she got a Nobel Prize for it in 1903, I think it was. And more recently, this whole business about CRISPR and all the things they can do manipulating molecules in the body, kind of thing. That was Emmanuelle Carpentier and Jennifer Doudou. And again, two females that worked on that and broke the science wide open, so that that's a big field right now.
That is a big field, and it also spurs off many other fields. But there's so many opportunities for girls, and I think that's something that we really have to look at and how we can show them these opportunities.
Well, how do you show them that?
Could we see the first slide, please? So what we try to offer at the Y is an opportunity for girls to come in. We have a program, STEM Horizons. It's free to middle schoolers. And they come in and they meet a female STEM professional. These particular slides show the girls after they worked on the experiment that they got to do. They met a engineer who's in a predominantly male field, environmental engineering, and she actually physically goes out. She physically goes out and checks out water resources, and she physically looks out to see what type of manipulation her company can do in order to improve the systems of water throughout Massachusetts. And then the girls got to actually create their own water filtration system. So to give them an opportunity, like, here's a young woman. She's fresh out of college. She's loving her job. It's active. She's moving. She's learning, and she's working in a predominantly male field. These are probably the two most important things we're showing, but then they need to have an opportunity to work with their peers, to enjoy the science, to be relaxed in learning and failure. And working with a group is the best way to do that. As you can see, the girls are looking pretty happy about being part of that. Can we see the next slide? And to look at the diversity of scientists that we have come in, we have Covaris Inc. out of Woburn. They make DNA sharing machines. That for another day. That's a big conversation. But to simplify it, the woman that came in is an engineer. She's one of the ones that make the machines that create these DNA sharing machines. And she talked about creativity, and she talked about being willing to fail. And they did an activity using copper wire and batteries where they got to actually create a card that lights up. Sounds fairly simple, but there's so many ways for it to go wrong. But once again, the girls are in a situation. It's not a regular classroom. There's no grades. They're just there to give it a go, to fail, to try again, to fail, to try again, and then to feel wonderful when they actually reach what their final goal was, to make their card light up.
Well, you're mentioning one thing else, the ability to recognize you got to fail.
You have to fail. That's what science
And
is.
basically what development turns out to be is you build it and break it, build it and break it, and when it stops breaking, you throw the drawings over the wall to manufacturing and they make a bunch.
That's right. And I think that, I believe it was Thomas Edison said, anytime I invent something and get a pattern, people are so impressed. He says, actually, what I really did is I found 99 ways something didn't work and only one way that it did work.
Yeah.
So getting there is the majority of science and engineering, or any kind of hard science, or any kind of science. Can we see the next slide? I don't want to go too fast. But also, it's very important to show girls that being interested in science and using scientific equipment and being comfortable with computers and all aspects of that, that is absolutely not limited to what you would consider a STEM job. On the slide here, we have young girls. They are doing a town meeting, and the town meeting is about water resources and how they will be dispersed. They all had a role. They were given information, and the woman that came, the woman that we considered a STEM professional, was actually a lawyer. She was a lobbyist. And she just said to them, I have to understand this science if I'm going to speak up for it, if I'm going to help these people with what they need to accomplish. And this is just a great way to, sort of flip the conversation on why science is so important and how everybody needs to have some comfort level with it, because all the jobs are related to it.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Well, that's the other part of the problem, that in this day and age, there's so much technology in everything
Everything.
that you have to have a scientific background or a technical background to understand your smartphone. Or
You have to be tech savvy. But remember,
how do you
when they're
turn the-
two, their parents are handing them an iPad. So
Yeah.
these kids are far more comfortable with the beginning aspects of any type of tech.
And how do you turn on the washing machine or change the channel on a TV set? I mean, all of this stuff has gotten to be so complicated that you have to have a technical background, whether you like it or not.
Right. And I do think that the essence of that conversation is almost resolved itself with everything having technology in it. I mean, you can't even go to a store. If you want a self-checkout, you have to know where to begin on a self-checkout.
Yeah.
So technology is just so prevalent. Yeah. I'd love to see the next slide, please. Something, on the lines of the technology and the importance of the technology and how the girls need to have a comfort level with it. And I'm going to use that term a lot because it really is one of the most important things. Let's get them comfortable. So we know that they grew up using any type of technology. They all have their own iPhones. So walking in the door is easy for them. But what we like to give them is an opportunity not only with the STEM professional females, but also to use equipment that's that's actually used in these companies. It's actually used within the scientific community. The picture here, the girls had a great opportunity to use all sorts of wonderful multi-pipetting systems that were given to us that we got to borrow from the Framingham Heart Study, which is part of the UMass system. Mass General's research system. Incredible. And the women that run that lab, 3 females, all females. It was exciting. And another picture is here we have the girls went to cell signaling technology in Danvers, and they got to learn about just so many incredible aspects of what's called cell culture. And all females, once again, led this tour. The girls got to go in, they got to use some of the equipment, they got to see how the professionals use the equipment, and they got to see the whole setting. And it's amazing. The buildings are big, they're beautiful, they're impressive. Yeah. You know, these are wonderful places to work. You belong here. Everybody here is female working.
Yeah.
Yeah. And another picture that we have, here's an example. We went to Endicott College, and we got to go into their education training centers at the Judge Judy Science Center. And they just have the best training facility. It's beautiful. They have something that's called a tatamage, which is the picture that looks like a giant tablet. And the tatamage is impressive. It starts out with a giant cadaver, and you're able to manipulate this tablet so you can look at just the muscular system, just the nervous system, or you can even tap on the patella, and you can look at the bones. You can look at the knee and the structure of the knee. This type of equipment is what they're going to use when they go to college, and then possibly what they're going to use in their occupations. So once again, introducing them to these things, letting them see what's there, what's available, what they'll get to get their hands on when they get to college. Very motivating.
Yeah.
And once again, helps them to be more comfortable. I think you can always determine, we run different types of surveys at the end of our program, and the girls always talk about, we want more hands-on. Can we go visit more places? And I wish we could. Everything we do for STEM Horizons is completely grant funded and personal funded by different people that support the sciences. We're always looking for more money to be able to get more kids involved.
One of the things I think you mentioned earlier before we started this discussion was these are mostly middle school age girls.
This particular program is just middle schoolers.
And one of the things that I picked up on in studying the education of technical people is if you don't catch them early, by the time they get to high school, oh, that's too hard. I don't want to do that. It's beyond me. They get scared away from it when really they shouldn't.
There's also a very big social construct there.
And one of the things that I picked up, I did a little teaching for a while, and one of the things I picked up on is first, second, third grade, kids are starting to get involved in school, and they're starting to ask good questions. By the time they get to the 4th grade, they're asking very good questions.
Absolutely.
And they need to have very good answers, which, from my other perspective, is that there should be subject-specific teachers working in the 4th grade level. And I think middle school is getting to be on the border of, it's a little late to try to catch them because they're starting to get discouraged because, oh no, that's too tough. It's beyond me.
Well, I can speak primarily, not in great depth because I'm not a STEM teacher for the public schools, but the public schools do have STEM teachers.
Yeah.
And the kids in kindergarten, they're running simple robotics.
Yeah.
You know, they're doing age-appropriate critical thinking, and I think that Beverly School System has always really promoted and kept up with the times, as the expression goes, to really make sure that kids are exposed to as much technology as possible, much variation. So I do think that efforts are being done here, especially in our school system. The girls that are coming to me, say, start with the 5th and 6th grade program, they are telling us right off the bat they're comfortable with this, they want to do this, that's why they're here, they're motivated, they're not anxious about being there. However, interestingly enough, when you get to the 7th and 8th grade, there's a little more trepidation. And a lot of that is a social construct too, because girls start to diverge. Like they want to be in activities that in that group is represented by their peers, by other females. They want other females to be there. They want to be able to have conversations outside of this program. They want to have a tribe that likes science.
Yeah.
And quite often the tribe is 99% boys, and there's maybe 2 girls. But the schools offer things like Girls Decode. It's a coding program solely for girls in the middle schools, an after-school program. Terrific idea. These are the type of things we have to really look at. And I do think that, when you say subject specific, I think, once again, the STEM teachers are really teaching a diversity of, because STEM, STEM, they're teaching a diversity, so the kids are being exposed to it. But that isn't the case everywhere. Massachusetts is quite the flagship for that. If you look at other states, they're not seeing any science, so they almost walk in the door in high school.
Yeah. Well, again, by the time you get to high school, either you're into it, and this is another one of these things that I think is not recognized enough, that there's a lot of people that have to learn with their hands. You get the fancy name of tactile learners that they use for it. But there's a whole thing I picked up years ago that if you're sitting in class listening to a lecture, it's in one ear and out the other.
Absolutely.
If you sit down and write notes, the fact that you're using a different sense of your system to react to this information you're getting loads it in a different part of your brain. So now you got 2 locations where you've got that memory stored. And the fact that if you can play with the toys with your hands is a third.
Right,
way.
it's a third level, absolutely.
Third level. So what you're doing is adding more and more ability to retain the message, the story, what's going on. And I think the fact that you can get in there and play with your hands and it didn't break.
Right, or it did break and you got to fix it again.
Or, yeah, that's the thing. Yeah. Or you started with a pile of pieces and you put something together and son of a gun, it worked. And one of the things I used to use is Radio Shack, which is another long gone.
Oh my goodness, yes, that is long gone.
I'm full of ancient history.
Yeah.
But they used to have this 101 electronics kit. And I talked the school into buying a bunch of those, and that's what I used to use for the 8th
And the
grade.
kids must have loved it.
And every week we do here's the box, we're doing experiment number 5 or 8 or 10, and okay.
And things like that still exist.
Them.
They still exist. There's so many different opportunities for kids.
There's so much better equipment now.
There's so much better equipment. And also, a lot of research has shown that given the opportunity for tactile experiences, most people are tactile learners, and they're better when they're tactile learners. A small amount of information in the beginning, you dive in, and then discussion after, and then dive in again. And sort of the repeat cycle of failure, trial, and error, that's where all the learning really occurs.
Yes.
And it's so important. Can we see the next slide? I'm trying to figure it out. I'd like to talk about, right along with being the tactile learners. This is a picture of us at Abiomed. And we can look at the next slide. This is a group of girls I took to Abiomed. Once again, here they are, an opportunity to be tactile learners.
Yeah.
So Abiomed gives us a tour. We meet so many STEM professionals. That place is just, there's so many women leading the charge of amazing science. They have something called the Impella. It's an internal heart pump. It has saved thousands of lives. They have such a humanitarian story. The girls love it. But here we are, tactile learners. So the girls get to go into what's called the training room, and they get to use the equipment that the people who build the impeller get to use while they're working and while they're training. They got to completely suit up, they got to wear all the equipment, and they got to try several different parts of building and constructing the impeller. The girls walk away with that. They're just so excited. They're so happy because not only have they learned something incredibly important, understand the impact of Abiomed, but they're seeing the humanitarian prospect. This is where I can help. I can be an engineer and I can help.
Well, one of the things that impressed me about that part of the story is that, okay, there is the heart pump, and it's got a bunch of pieces. The impeller is the important one in the middle.
Tell us this big.
Yeah, that does the actual work of pushing the blood around your system. And they get to play with the real thing.
They get to use the actual equipment.
It's not something they put together like a bunch of Lego blocks that, okay, this looks like a car when you put all the pieces together. This is the real thing.
That's why it's so important for us to have programs like this where we have STEM professionals coming in, bringing their equipment, sharing with us going out to them and literally using what the kids can use in this occupation or they could potentially use when they're being educated at university.
And I think that this is one of the things that makes Massachusetts so effective in this game, that there are companies around that are willing to say, oh, yeah, bring the kids in.
Absolutely, and it is so important to make those community connections.
And when I was playing this game, I used to take them to New England Biolabs when they used to be here in Beverly. They're going to come back, I keep hearing. Or I used to take one of the classes over to the Bates Lab.
Well, you were ahead of the game because a lot of people were just still doing what's called sage on the stage. You remember that? Stand up, rows, take notes. I'm going to teach you, and that doesn't work.
In both of those cases, there were a lot of females around. The lady that ran the tour for us at Bates Lab, she was the director of the instrumentation, and that was a significant job, and as part of the experiments
right, and historically a man's position. And
it was something that I think the people in the class, especially the girls, were sort of, kind of thing that they didn't expect to see somebody. And same thing with the New England Biolabs. There was 3 ladies that used to take 1/3 of the class each, and okay, let's go do an experiment. Let's go play with something.
Right.
And I always used to get the complaint afterwards, I don't like the smell of that room. That's where they were cooking up the molecules. And
right. Cell culture doesn't smell the best.
Well,
but sometimes it does for those people that love it. I don't want to insult cell culture.
Yeah.
Right. Could we look at a couple more slides? Because there's a couple other things, right along everything we've been talking about. Just quickly talking about, once again, back to the hard sciences, computer science. So few women go into computer science. It's the smallest amount, maybe 17% are going to college, maybe 14% work are in the workforce. One of the best things we can do for that is teaching kids code. Teaching them to code using simplistic code that they can get comfortable with. I think a lot of people say, they look, oh, well, what are you doing? Are you doing Python? I'm like, we'll get there, but right now we want to do something simple. We want them to be comfortable, be excited about it, and not be frustrated. So you start with some simplistic programs. This is a root program. It's strong, it's great, it's very pictorial, it's good for younger kids, it's good for middle schoolers, but it has the ability to get a little more difficult. So we start here, and if we could see the next slide, we just got some new equipment, which I'm super excited about. Can we see the next slide? We're going to start having what's called spheros. Spheros are great. It's equitable to Python. This is like something you could use in the real world to code. This is going to be our next step for the girls in STEM Horizons and also for the Y camps.
Well, one thing I think a lot of people don't recognize is there's a computer language out there that's a little bit obsolete now called Ada. And it's named after the inventor of the program. And that was the very first computer program. And it was Ada Lovelace, a female who came up with this computer program.
There have always been
so it's
small
not something new.
Right.
No.
There's always been women in computer program, but it's always been such a small number. And quite a while ago, they weren't getting any credit. I mean, very movies that really show that showcase that, like Hidden Figures. Well, look what those women were doing. And they got no recognition until the movie was made.
Well, if we go back into some more of my ancient history, when I first started working at GE, we used to have computers. They were ladies who ran
Data processing. My sister did that.
ran a big calculator. Chunk.
Well, that is really a history if you're doing junk. But also data processing was predominantly a female job.
Yeah.
And that was the very first simplistic languages,
And the same thing is true, I think, of the very first computers. I'm trying to remember the name of the female admiral that came up with the concept of how long is a microsecond. She used to run around with a bunch of wires, and this is a certain length of
Well, I'll have to
wire.
look at that, because I don't know that either.
And she made a presentation of it, sat through it one time. But she was working on the very first computers that were invented in World War II to break the code or to make calculations of range and accuracy for artillery. And making artillery tables used to be a female computer job. Ding, 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 clunk, with a big Monroe calculator.
Right.
So it's not something new. It's just something that's been there, but now it's the time to, I think,
Right, the numbers are changing.
Yeah.
I think the availability of schools to afford or to be granted money to be able to have the right type of equipment, for the Y to have a STEM program. I mean, just 15 years ago, the Y never would have imagined it was having, such a large STEM program.
Yeah.
We run classes, camps, all STEM. I'd like to show the last couple slides, please. Here we have the picture that has the girls in it is we did for our STEM Horizons, we did something on zombie science. It was excellent. It was on neurology. It was on the brain. They got to dissect a sheep brain. They got to learn the different parts of the brain and how they affect the body and, the whole system.
Yeah.
It was one of the biggest hits we ever had. I'm not quite sure if it's because we threw in the zombie aspect and it made it sort of exciting to walk in the door, but they loved it. So I made a decision. I said, we need to make this a camp. We need to get some younger kids involved in this. The science isn't too difficult for them. It's very hands-on. So we have a zombie camp we dissect brains, we learn about zombies, but there's all the fun stuff. We get to play, some fun games related to zombies as a camp should
Well,
be.
it's got to be fun too.
Yeah, exactly. It's got to be fun. But if you look at the picture of the zombie camp, there's 3 boys. Now, unfortunately, almost all the STEM camps have a tendency to be about 90% boys. We do run Harry Potter camps, which are able to bring in some great chemistry and potions, excellent science, and those are majority girls, but it's also a literature base. So we are seeing that divide still with the younger kids, and we absolutely want to be able to get more girls in our sciences, in our science camps.
At the end of the slides.
That is the end of the slides.
Oh, we made it. I didn't think we were going to make it.
We did.
But anyway, so basically, I guess the Y is doing a tremendous job bringing this type of information available in a almost painless way. And you're not force-feeding it information. You're letting it develop by playing with it.
Exactly, and that is so important.
I got to give Ben and Jerry credit for the idea that if it ain't fun, why are you doing it? So you're making a program that's fun, and kids are getting into it, and I think my only complaint is more kids aren't involved with it. There should be more of them involved. There's never enough.
Always trying to find a way for more.
Yeah, there's never enough. And ladies and gentlemen, thank you very much for watching us this evening. And you'll notice at the end of the credits, there's my email address. If you have some comments, some thoughts, and you would like to express them, be my guest. And if you would like to join us at the table sometime, we can make room for you. And thanks again. See you next time.